Hello, everyone. Thank you for being a part of Empowerfly's Connect Series initiative. Today, we'll be speaking to the inspiring UmaSofia Srivastava, the former Miss Teen USA of 2023, author of The White Jaguar, and upcoming musician. Uma, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently working on?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me, guys. I remember we were just like talking about how long I've known you since like 2023, which is so crazy. I'm very grateful to like have experienced like your guys' growth, and I'm very grateful that you guys have stuck with me as well. So, like the first time I guess that we had a conversation, I think I was still Miss Teen USA. And so a lot of things have like changed since then. I did not end up finishing my year as Miss Teen USA because there was a lot of corruption on the national level. And I think like as the years have passed, more and more of that is being revealed, like that it goes way past even like the USA organization into like universe and like I think like at the end of the day, the thing that was most important to me and which is why I love you girls is that you guys are people who stick to your values, and that is very much me and who I am. So initially when I first got into pageants, I was a very young, like kind of scared girl because I didn't really have it that easy socially growing up. So it was a beautiful outlet for me at the time to, give back to my community and also like public speaking and sharing my voice, which I still think are great things that all girls should be involved in. But would I necessarily recommend pageantry? I don't know. From my experience, I think like the concept and idea is very beautiful and bringing a bunch of girls together, but there are better ways to do that. And I think when I stepped down and talked about how, I wasn't allowed to necessarily do the work that I promised to do with the title, and therefore the title didn't mean anything because it was the work that was like really what was meaningful. It also like that in itself helped connect me to a bunch of girls who had been in similar positions to some like extent. And I think that's really beautiful is when we use our voices, like even if the end goal didn't work out for us, it connects us. So like since then, I realized, I honestly fully thought that I was gonna go into politics like right after high school and like just start campaigning. I actually just gave a talk on this because one of my good friends was running for like Board of Ed commissioner, and we were talking a lot about that the whole thing that we were talking about is like when you're 18, like you're shoved into like a box and you feel like you have to stay there because you're like, if I don't stay there, I don't have it together. And so I was very much like in that 5-year plan mindset where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go to school, like I'm gonna work for the government. And I just realized like after that experience as Miss Teen USA, I'm a very like justice my moral compass is very strong, and a lot of the things that we're seeing nowadays with politics is less about like helping people and more about like I mean it's always been that way, like more about like your personal kind of like what do you aspirations, what do you want? And I don't know if I would have been happy in that space. So, when I didn't get into like the colleges that I thought I would, I kind of shifted my mindset. I was like, well, okay, I have nothing to lose. Like, what do I really want to do? And so I started volunteering with this organization called Oxfam, which I love. They partner a lot with like music artists like Billie Eilish, and they partner with people who care about the environment and care about like people in war-torn communities and like giving money to like important issues like that. And I realized like, okay, there wasn't one route to helping people. I could do something that I really love, which is music, and also continue my work like as a humanitarian if I really wanted to, which I do. So, after like graduating high school, I released my first single and I listen to it now and it's like, so cringy, but it was an important first step because like I think a lot of the time what I think now is like, oh, I should just do it scared, even if it's like really bad and I put something out that like years later I'll cringe at. Like I took that first step, and if I didn't take it, like it wouldn't be there. So since then, I have had so many wonderful opportunities in the world of music to where the point is like I'm in this like little incubation phase before, I could start finally releasing my EP. But the first single is slotted to come out in January, so that's really exciting. I think like I was talking to my mom and she was like, you'll never be in this like before phase ever again in your life. You'll never be in like the month before you go off to NYU, before your first single comes out. So like enjoy the process because sometimes like I can get a little impatient, especially like with how much like life changes have happened in the past 3 years. But I think like right now I feel at a time in my life where like I'm on the precipice of something, and if it works out, it could be really, really great. And if it doesn't, I feel like I'll be okay because pivoting has kind of just become part of my life, you know? So yeah, that's like a rehash of everything that's been like matriculating in the past couple months.
Well, yeah, I think what you said about like feeling scared and then doing it anyway is something that we three have heard a lot from like other women mentors and like big like influential women who are working in like positions in like the corporate world. Like they've mentioned that a lot. So I think that that's like a really important point that we have to stress. And I guess a follow-up question that we have is like we hear a lot like for college students like there's no other time again in your life where you have less responsibilities and like the experimentation phase is like these 4 years. Do you think that kind of mindset has influenced the path that you've decided to take currently and kind of like what your vision is for 2026 per se?
Yeah. Oh my God. Wait, I was watching what was I watching? I was watching Girls, which like recently on social media, I guess just because of how bad the economy is and like we're in a recession, we're reliving that like millennial optimism era. So like I'm like I'm moving to New York. Let me watch some Girls from like 2011 like be in Bushwick and stuff. Like this is going to be my life, I guess. But she said something about how like when you're in it, it feels like very hard and you don't know necessarily what the path is going to look like, but you're going to miss that feeling once you've already kind of made it to your goal, because that's the beauty is like the not knowing. And so, when it comes to like not knowing what you do, she like in college, your only job is kind of to be yourself if you're lucky. Like, and I acknowledge like I'm very privileged. Like my dad worked 4 jobs through college to like pay for, university and stuff. And I am very grateful that I don't have to do those things just because of like the life that I've been afforded. So, when it comes with a certain privilege to say that all you have to do is be yourself, but like that is the life that I'm living. And yeah, you never get 4 years if you're lucky enough to be yourself and not have to worry about, a job or like making ends meet. So yeah, I think like all of that to say opportunities to just pursue your education and to really have time to like figure yourself out, that is a privilege in itself because not like if you're worried about your next meal, you don't have time to like be thinking about what do I want to do creatively or like what does my personality mean? And we see that all the time. So it's like if you have that opportunity, you have to be grateful because it is a privilege. And I think that's like what I think about every day. It's like, okay, I'm stressed about, my future in this music career, but I have a potential music career. Like that's not something that anyone can just say like yes, I worked for it, but also that is a privilege and I have to be grateful for it. So like a lot of the things that I think like keeps you grounded during this time is gratitude for your opportunities because yeah, it can be stressful, but like depending on like where you are and who you are, not everyone gets the opportunities for even an education point blank, like regardless of what you're studying. So I think like that's kind of what gets me through it is that, I could complain because it does get hard and stressful. And just because like I'm privileged doesn't mean that like I won't have it difficult, but it also means that I can have a little bit more gratitude for my situation and, like I will make it through, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you're talking about like the importance of having opportunities, but also like combining that with constantly seeking discomfort. Because I know for me, especially like on Instagram, I'll follow like female influencers that are like, first day of doing something that I don't want to do. And it like inspires me to like actually like do stuff and
Yeah,
actually.
no, I love that content. And I think that like when people say like blanket statement, oh, social media is so bad, I don't think so. Like I
Mhm.
think it depends on how you use it. Like if you're like consuming a bunch of AI slop, yeah, like it's bad. But like but I love it because I get to follow like girls like you who are like changing the world and I'm like damn, I have to get up off my couch and do something. Like this is important, you know? So yeah, I agree with that.
No, yeah, Aadya and Ayushi and I were just talking about this before. There's this Olivia Zhang. She basically has a nonprofit and she's so cool and she's like all over social media. And we were like, she inspires us to do better. So we love that. But I did want to ask, since you really prioritize like experience and kind of looking at people as inspiration, what are the coolest initiatives you've been a part of or people that you've met on this platform that have inspired you to do better?
Yeah, so like I mean I mentioned Oxfam. I think like that they were a huge part of my pivot because prior to that most of the things that I were like was involved in was like very either tied to the pageant or tied to like more government kind of stuff. And yeah, humanitarian aid is like a government thing, like, and that is the path that I was going down on. But there's also like so many other avenues that intersect with nonprofits I feel like are just not talked about enough because creative fields, obviously we know this is they're looked down on because like, oh, you can't do that as a job. And I, even though I had parents who everyone like when they find out my parents are like Indian and Mexican, they're like, oh, you must have had so much pressure growing up. But actually not the case at all. Like my mom was an art teacher. My dad always kind of like knew the importance of like having arts in your life. And so, that whole mindset that I had about like, oh, I can't make arts a career was like from me because I felt like I wasn't good enough and there was like no way I can make it. So I think like it starts with realizing that the world is so much bigger than you think. And that's kind of how I felt when I started working with Oxfam because, going to these concerts, I would volunteer for like 7 hours on my feet and get people to sign petitions about things that like would become legislation, but it was directly tied to music, And then like from there, um, I remember the previous summer I was invited to give a keynote with an organization called Grow Up. And that was interesting for me too, because that experience with them, that organization was very similar to the girl friendship and like girlhood that I experienced in the pageant, just without that element of like performance and entertainment.
Mhm.
So I immediately realized I was like, why don't we elevate girls' spaces like this to the same extent that we like do these like antiquated things like pageants? Because I mean, if I had found Girl Up, I probably would have been a part of Girl Up first and not done the pageant, And that's not to say like, oh, if I would go back in time, I would do it over. But it's like, I think that kind of signaled to me that as girls, we don't really have that many spaces to just be around girls and express ourselves. And for that, I think I've also been very lucky is that, when I transferred to an all-girls school, I think it does make a difference. Like, having been in classes with only girls and stuff, even though I was always very outspoken, it definitely added another layer to myself where I feel like I'm more assertive as a woman, as a young woman. So, like going into college, I'm going to take that with me. And then I think also you guys too. I mean, I don't say this lightly, but like you started from as three girls in high school, and I think that's like very aspirational to a bunch of young girls because you nowadays with social media, you don't need like a fancy brand deal or like to have all these connections. If you work really hard, you could build it for yourself. And I think like that's one thing that you guys do. That's something that I have to do for like music and social media. And yeah, I think it's really interesting that, social media has kind of turned all of us into our own nonprofits in a sense. Like, if you want to raise $100,000 for charity, you could do it like as an individual on social media. So, yeah, I think those are like two organizations that like really kind of changed my mindset when it comes to giving back and also like how social media plays a role in that. And I still obviously like do my work with Lotus Petal Foundation and Bridge of Books. Like I think that they're like wonderful organizations. Lotus Petal helps in India and Bridge of Books collects books for children in New Jersey for those like of you watching. But yeah, I mean, children's education is still very important to me. It's just now there's so many different avenues then to like to get your work across, and I think that's really important to realize because we're in the 21st century, it's time to like move away from those like antiquated ways of like reaching out to people because otherwise it's about people, and if you don't catch up with the times, then you won't be doing as much good as you think you could be doing if you had all the resources and knowledge of that.
Yeah, I feel like as
Mm.
founders, we talk about it a lot that like people don't realize the power of social media, like the power it holds to like
Yeah.
grow your missions. And I feel like a lot of the times, like people ask the three of us, like, how did you grow like Empowerfly? And our answer is always like almost always social media because the way that it allows you to connect with people is just like incredible.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like people just also don't realize like that I feel like when you're 17, you think like adults have it all together and you're like, "Oh my God, like I'm so young, I don't know anything." But one thing that I realized is like when I was Miss Teen USA and I didn't even have any help from the organization, like the reason that I stayed busy during my year and I was still giving back and like trying to fulfill all the promises I made was because I would like literally every weekend cold email 100 people. And maybe two of those people would get back to me, but two of those people would get back to me and then I would go to an event, you know? So it's like when you start thinking about it, again, it's like that whole do it scared thing. If you're like, oh, like I'm a 17-year-old or 18-year-old in college and I don't have any credits to my name and like who's gonna answer my email? The thing is, these people who are like at like higher levels, they're a lot more they have a lot more feelers out than you would think. So like when you take the time to like DM someone on Instagram, like you guys DM me and that's like how this relationship started. So I don't know. I think like if we took more chances like that, encouraged more people to take chances, like the network would be so much broader because I think a lot of it is just like fear that stops us from, taking that next step.
So have gotten a lot of opportunities through DMs. In fact, gotten my got an opportunity to build a robot that I find really interesting through a DM.
Oh,
So it's like, yeah, since I'm an engineering major, it helps a lot. So for my career, so resume.
yeah.
So what is something about girl up slash women's communities that are often overlooked or misunderstood?
I think like um this is an interesting question because it's funny whenever I tell anyone that like I transferred to an all-girl school or I was in the pageant world or I'm involved with like girl-focused organizations, they're like, "Oh my God, it must be so catty. There must be much competition." But I actually think that when you take out that aspect of like performance for not only the opposite gender, but just like for people older than you, for like authority figures who haven't lived what it's like to be a young woman, then all of a sudden you get the raw realness of like what it means to be a young woman and like female friendship. And there's not as much competition. And there's always one or two girls, but it's like not their fault because that's how we've all been conditioned to grow up is that like it's a zero-sum game. If another woman is succeeding, you're not succeeding. And that's not at all how guys are like raised, if like their friend does something cool, they're like, "Oh yeah, support your friend. Like he just scored the winning touchdown. Like that's awesome. You just do it next time, but like support your friend." If a girl scored a touchdown, you'd be like, "Oh, she's so awful. Like I that should have been me." But that's so like that's a terrible way to think, and that's why all of us like before that, that's like why we were oppressed because those are, the environments that we were like learning from is that like if I win, that means that other girl can't win. And in girl focused spaces, the message changes and it's like, no, when this girl wins, I also win. Like, and that is, changing that narrative is kind of, I think, how we get our movements to be pushed forward, especially like now we have more agency as women than like we ever have in history. And to waste that on like the feeling of, obviously on social media, there's still a lot of like echo chambers that do pit women against each other. I think it's like important to retain that knowledge that, there's so many opportunities is nowadays, especially like we don't have to be fighting against each other. We have to be working together. And I think that's why it's so important to invest in girls' spaces because it's newer. Those things didn't exist 20, 30 years ago for like our moms and our parents. So, it's up to us to like keep fostering these programs because we know they work. Like there's so many statistics about how girls, in classrooms with more girls perform better later on in life because they have grown up around the knowledge that they can speak out and their voice is important. So, I mean, I'm not saying like transfer schools and go to an all-girls school, but like foster communities within girls in your neighborhood, in your town, within your schools, so that we could all uplift each other, when it gets to that point that we want to pursue our passions. Um, Actually, like as it relates to music, I was just talking to this producer who, I mean, if you're into music, there's like a lot of these like collectives, like especially in the rap world, they're like boys who are in a friend group and they're known by this like name. But I thought to myself, I'm like, that doesn't exist for girls. For girls, the conversation is always like, oh, who is going to be the number one pop girl? Like, who is going to take the crown or whatever? But it's like, why are we taking the crown? Why can't we share it? Like, why can't there be, a group of really cool women who are just doing their art like the groups of really cool men who are just doing their art and not being pitted against each other instead of, being asked like, oh, like who looks hotter in this outfit? The men are being asked, oh, so like how did this collaboration occur? How did you guys start this relationship? And those aren't questions that we're asking female musicians. So it's kind of disheartening. But like I believe that that will be the next wave is like girls forming these collectives and groups and spaces that normally like wouldn't have been allowed to like exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you talked about like girls being pitted against each other because I feel like that's so common in every area of life. And I feel like we also like grew up like that. Like we grew up to be conditioned like, oh, we have to be the best. Like if another girl is there, then like, okay, you need to like kick her out. But we
Yes.
can literally work together. Like I feel like when I'm in a community of girls and we look out for each other in a positive way, for example, like in Powerfly. Like when we look out for each other in a positive way, like I feel like we all learn more. So I love that you mentioned that.
Thank you. No, and I mean like I think it's just something that we've all experienced is if you want this scholarship, if you want this opportunity, you have to make sure that the other girl doesn't get it. But that's not our fault. It's because we've been told that only one of us can get this opportunity and one of this is like can get this scholarship because of how like systems are formed and like the systemic like sexism that's like ingrained in our society. So, I mean, if you can't fix it top down, we have to start from bottom up and like just realize and make these whatever companies, schools realize that like we're not going to stand for this. We're here and like we're together. And if you can't have all of us, then you're not going to have any of us. That's why I think like these independent groups are so important because they exist you guys exist outside of any university, outside of any person like wagging their finger at you and telling you this is what you have to do. So like in that way, you guys are exercising your agency and inspiring a whole generation of women. And that's, what I want to do with my music, what I wanted to do as Miss Teen USA, what I want to do as like a humanitarian. Like that is the end goal to inspire more young women to get involved and use their voice.
Yeah, talking about these barriers that you've mentioned that women face in like all these industries. Have you ever experienced barriers as a woman in the industries that you're currently a part of? Because you're a part of so many different ones.
I mean, 100%. Like I think I was actually talking about this because so growing up, it was like strange for me to experience the shift after I had won the pageant because I grew up in a predominantly white community. And even like when there were other girls who did look like me, all of us were kind of talked down to because as a woman, I'm sure you've experienced it, like based on your looks, like if you don't look a certain way, if you don't fit the beauty standard, sometimes people like don't even treat you like a person. So it's actually like crazy to like go from that and then in 2 years experience people thinking that like I am dumb or stupid because I'm doing a beauty pageant and it's all about my looks and there's like no substance behind me. And seeing both sides of the spectrum, it made me like really sad and disillusioned me because obviously when I was a little girl and I was getting bullied for having like a unibrow, braces, glasses, I wanted to be the version of me that I ended up becoming so badly, but I still felt the same amount of loneliness because of how other people were perceiving me. Because it's that whole thing that like if you're beautiful, you cannot be smart. And if you're smart, you can't be beautiful and you don't deserve respect because that's all you're good for is like your brain and like no one sees like any societal value. And that's really disgusting. Like that's really disgusting that as a woman we have to choose between being respected or like societally or being respected for our minds and then still being passed over for job opportunities and in educational spaces because we're women. So, yeah, I mean, I think it happened to me a lot in high school. And then, like, when I transferred, a lot less because it was mostly like girl spaces. But then, when I was Miss Teen USA, I would go to like these events, and sometimes, like, men would feel comfortable saying something or kind of like making a pass at me when I was there for my job. And I was also there as like a smart, independent young woman, and that was kind of overlooked because of like how I chose to present myself. So I think like as a woman, men can get away with presenting themselves in so many different ways more than we can. We have to be 100% perfect on all the time in order to be respected at the same level. And I hope that there is a day where, we could just be ourselves and not have to put this performance on. And I think like that's what I want to do with my music, and that's how I've been kind of living my life since I stepped down. Is like I don't care what people think of me. I don't care how weird people think I am online, or if they think I'm stupid, or if they think that because I did the pageant, I must be like the most out of touch person in the world, because I know at the end of the day, those things aren't true. And I think once we tell young girls to just center their lives more around themselves rather than what people think, which is a really hard thing to do. It's very hard. And like I still struggle with it. And I still struggle when people like make comments about my body on the internet, or like my face, or like what I'm choosing to do with my life, and like why is she going to this school when she could have gone to that school? Like people are always going to have an opinion, but at the end of the day, your success relies on your happiness, not like what other people are thinking of you. So, yeah, I mean, very long spiel for that. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, it's definitely happened. And I think it's sad that the onus is on us to change that narrative, because it should just not happen in general.
Yeah. I think what you said, especially about there being like a double standard almost, like I see this a lot with like women like content creators. A lot of the time they'll come online and speak about like, because I have a corporate job, I like can't present myself on social media the way that I want to because it's deemed unprofessional, even though nothing they're doing is unprofessional at all. And so I feel like we see that a lot, and like it really like brings into mind how like double the standards can be. So our last question for you is, in one sentence, if you could provide advice to young girls who are watching about absolutely anything, what is like one sentence that you would say that you think has made a difference for you and is important for all girls to kind of think about and reflect on?
I think this might be the exact same advice that I gave last time, but it just like rings so true. And it's very cliche, but it's be yourself. Because the times in my life that I have strayed from what I wanted myself to be, I have felt so empty. And maybe I made that sacrifice because I thought it would get me to where I was going faster, but it never did. It only just made me unhappy with myself. And then I had to like undo everything that I did in that frame of mind and just do exactly what my gut told me to do in the first place. I think like as women, we're told not to trust ourselves when our intuition is one of the most powerful things that we have. Like so far in my life, I have been right about so many things the first time, and I've spent time undoing certain things because I chose not to listen to myself and chose to like listen to what people were telling me was right for me. But at the end of the day, no one else is living your life. You're living your life. So if you have like, don't be impulsive, but if you have like a gut reaction to something and you feel so right that in your heart this is true, I'm a proponent of following that because it's never failed me. And more often than not, when you are a woman who is independent, who cares about her education, who cares about what she's passionate about, girls I've met like that are rarely ever wrong when it comes to pursuing their future, because you've gotten this far because you've been right. So why would you all of a sudden, when you get to a certain level of success, start listening to other people and not yourself when you are the reason that you made it that far? So yeah, of course, like be open to criticism, be open to, learning, but don't lose sight of who you are, that core person. Because I mean, this year, people like I know personally, not like not my family, but people like, your acquaintances with, like, oh, you've changed so much. But I know deep in my heart that I've gone back to being the like weird, beautiful version of myself that I was in middle school because that was my authentic self. And now I've gone back to being her. It's not like a whole question of like changing as a person. I've grown, but I will always be that little girl full of whimsy and excitement and passion for the things that she loves. So it's like about going back to that version before all of these societal things told you what you can and can't be.
Thank you so much, UmaSofia, for having this conversation with us. We learned so much and we're so excited for so many more Connect events. Thank you guys.
Thank you.